that's water. Turn the turbine, right? You got this 18-foot in diameter penstock. It's being squeezed down smaller and smaller, increase the velocity to turn that turbine. So it sounds hideous.
In this episode, we're taking you on a private tour of Bull Shoals Dam with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We are excited to bring you with us as we experience one of Arkansas's biggest and most important structures. Bull Shoals Dam was built from 1947 to 1951. It was dedicated by President Harry S. Truman on July 2, 1952. At the time, it was one of the largest concrete dams in the country. It stretches more than 2,200 feet across the White River and stands 256 feet tall. It's what created Bull Shoals Lake, a huge reservoir with over 45,000 acres of water and nearly 1,000 miles of shoreline. This dam doesn't just make a beautiful lake for boating and fishing. It's also key for flood control and power generation. We've been admiring this dam from above, the scenic overlook, the visitor center, and of course, all the boating on Bull Shoals Lake. But today we're going inside to learn how this massive structure actually works. So grab a glass of sweet tea and come along. We're heading behind the gates of Bull Shoals Dam for an unforgettable tour.
My name is Jay Townsend. I'm the Chief of Public Affairs for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Little Rock District, and today we're going to take a tour of Bull Shoals Dam. So we talked about a Francis turbine the last time I think we met, and I don't know if we had a good example visible, but when water comes through the penstock, it's hitting the turbine and turning it, which then turns that shaft, which then turns the magnets, which generates electricity. So this is what a Francis turbine looks like. And there's no spider webs on the ones that we're using because the water's washing through it.
And they're a little bigger.
Yeah, that may have gone to one of the house units. Remember the smaller units that we look at? Yeah. You can see here some older photos. And the doors are the originals. It's like a time capsule. When we went through Greer's, we saw 2 hydropower units. Bull Shoals has 8. About 8,000 cubic feet per second passing through right now through the generators. And then of course we've got the gantry crane here that helps us do maintenance on it. You can see this unit here, this first one. They're having some work done on it. But it's 70 years old, so constant maintenance and upkeep. The generating capacity at Greer's is 88 megawatts, and here it's 352 megawatts. So annually, Greer's produces 189,000 megawatt hours. Here is 596,000. So the output here is much more. What's interesting to note too is by tomorrow, so we had the 5th wettest spring on record, and we're just now releasing the last bit of that spring rainfall runoff, and we'll have that evacuated by tomorrow.
Oh, really?
Yep. Just happens to be tomorrow. So we got that smartphone app that I always tell you guys about. We can pull up Bull Shoals, and when it loads, let me click on it again. I get 1 bar in here. But the current power pool is 661. That's the conservation pool. That's where we want the reservoir at. So we've been releasing spring rains all summer long, and we're down to 661.5. So we're 5/10 of an inch away from getting rid of all that spring rainfall. And it took several months to do that, but that's how you do it. You capture those repeated rainfall events in the pool and slowly release it downstream to prevent flooding. So last year was a less than average rainfall year, so we had a really dry summer and there was no flooding at the campsites and stuff around the reservoirs. We had 2.1 million visitors behind Bull Shoals, and that pulled in $1.5 million to the Treasury at roughly 20 of the recreation areas that we have. In a year like this one, when we have a wet spring, a lot of those campgrounds are underwater, so we're not able to generate that revenue and return it to the Treasury. And folks aren't able to camp, but flood risk reduction is the primary mission. I just pulled July's number. Nathaniel's team helped me get these numbers, but at Beaver, Bull Shoals, Dardanelle, Greer's Ferry, Norfolk, Ozark, and Table Rock, just through the month of July, They produced enough power to meet the average monthly needs of 579,000 customers, so households. And then in those 31 days, that was the average annual needs of 47,000 homes.
Wow.
And so being able to slowly release that water through these hydropower generators kept a lot of homes powered up this summer. And this summer was one of those critical emergency type situations where the grid was maxed out. We needed to be running hydropower as often as the grid demanded it. So you can just get an idea of how big the bay is, walking through past all 8 units. So then you can see here too, the nameplates on them. So this is basically rinse and repeat all the way down. So we'll go down another level real quick. But it's always fun to mention the big dam tools, right? So we got them at all the dams, but you just can't go out to a hardware store and pick any of these up. And I don't know how much that weighed, but it was heavy. Maybe I made it look easy, but it was heavy. So we were outside earlier and you guys saw that turbine. The water's turning that turbine that's turning this shaft.
That magnet's underneath or above?
Above, yeah. There may be another one that's got a gate we can see. So this is a good place to see it from. When that's turning, that means someone's house is getting power, that means a school's getting power, a hospital, a municipality. It's very important to be able to maintain these and keep them online. And it just continues on down the line. So just like with Greer's, they've got house units here. These are the smaller units that power the plant. So this is going down a level. Look at the house units. You can see the shaft and then the penstock coming in. It begins to move like a snail. It gets smaller and smaller to increase the velocity to turn the turbine. And this one over here is actually running. Down below is those wicket gates that we showed you guys. Gates that turn like this that allow more or less water to be injected into the turbine. And this is the wicket gate. This is one of the wicket gates that could be used for one of these 2 turbines. But it sits down in there and opens and closes, allowing more water in and out of that turbine. And it's also heavy. Yeah, that's the penstock. So water's moving through. The wicket gates are letting water into the turbine, and the velocity of that water is being increased by that pipe getting smaller and smaller and smaller as it goes around, so then it's able to turn that.
It's coming direct down the lake into this pipe.
Yeah.
And then it's getting funneled.
So it's turning the turbine, which turns the shaft, which turns the stator up above, turning that magnet up there, generating electricity.
And then what you see outside is all that being funneled in to go out into the river. When you see it turning up, all this eventually makes its way out.
That's right. Comes from the lake, comes through the dam, through the penstocks, out the hydropower turbines. So you see these smaller penstocks. These are for the house units. When we get behind here, you'll see the 18-foot in diameter penstocks that feed the main units. Smaller ones. So this one's quiet because it's the unit that's offline. But it'll get louder the further we go down. lot of funny noises like that. And that's water turning the turbine, right? You got this 18-foot in diameter penstock. It's being squeezed down smaller and smaller, increase the velocity to turn that turbine. So it sounds hideous. Now this is a lot of concrete, and this is a great fact. 2.1 million cubic yards of concrete were used to build this dam. You could build a road that's 6 inches thick and 20 feet wide from here to Orlando, Florida.
How thick?
20, so 6 inches thick and 20 inches wide. You could build a road from here to Orlando. And there's enough power produced here. You can produce enough power to supply Orlando with power, or Las Vegas, cities of those sizes, just from this plant alone. You just look at the size of the scale.
So this is before it's funneled down smaller, right?
Right.
It comes through here at full size.
It's still 18 feet in diameter here. It'll shrink down before it injects into the turbine.
So on the lake side, at some point there's literally a big hole with a grate over that starts with water coming in?
Yeah, simplified down like that, yes. That's after the water has generated its power, it's then discharged. You guys ever seen anything like this? And again, we can keep walking down, but it's the same thing over and over and over again. Of course, you do need some little tools too.
Regular stuff.
If you came in off the streets to work with us, there's a hydropower program that you go through to learn how to become that journeyman level that can come in here and do the work and the maintenance on these units. There's a big learning curve there. So they asked us not to go in today, but this is where they're doing the work. But you got great specialized crews able to do the work.
Yeah.
And I always like to reiterate too, just these are good folks. They live and work in these communities around here, teaching Sunday school and coaching t-ball. Just good folks that work in the dam. I mean, this is the view right here. And when water's coming over these gates, it's amazing. It's intense. And we kind of talked about this the last time. You'll have that water coming through here violently, and it comes into this stilling basin right here. And you can see these giant concrete baffle blocks here to break up the turbidity.
So when it's flowing, obviously it's flowing way over this little wall here.
That's right.
Oh yeah, you can see the concrete squares.
I had my polarized sunglasses on, so I could see them clearly when I was telling you about it. I didn't realize it was the glasses.
Oh yeah.
That's why your fly fishermen will wear polarized sunglasses. See into the water better.
Water has 3 energy states when it's flowing. So it has supercritical, critical, and subcritical. Most of the time what you see is subcritical flow. Critical flow is that flow right where when a wave is coming over a rock in a river and it just sits there, that wave, that would be critical. And then supercritical, the water is going faster than the pressure wave can travel in it. So if you were to throw a rock into it, the ripple would just disappear downstream. This coming off here is going to be supercritical, really high energy. When it goes into this, it's subcritical, it's got to make that energy change. Subcritical flows at a really deep depth, supercritical is a really low depth. And these baffle blocks and that end weir are designed to push it up and make it jump to that subcritical flow, that slower flow.
Okay.
More quickly, and then your pressure waves can travel in it. It doesn't carry as much debris. It's a much safer flow for the river.
It's in the lower level is the most pressure, is what you're saying? So it's turning it in and calming it down before it goes down.
Right.
Okay. Very cool. I noticed it because we camp at Toadsuck a lot. I've always thought you're staring at the water, and I could have swear it's going the wrong direction, and you realize it's because it's, like you're saying, it's rotating.
Right, so you have that really fast water coming down underneath, it rotates it over and slides on out.
And these gaps here, Nathaniel, these are the sluice gates.
Yes, those are the conduits for the sluices, and they were used for care of water when building the dam. And the primary use for them now would be if you were draining the dam. Once you got below where you could bring
you
water
need to get
through
even
the
lower
pit
to
stops.
work on it or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
In a flood operation, it's not a good thing to have to use those because the pressure is so high in them. Remember that boiling sound that we're hearing on the penstocks? Well, the penstocks are made for that. Those are not, and it could tear up the inside of the dam. So we rarely use those in a full load situation.
And the water from the lake, is coming down really low when it goes through those?
It's coming from the very bottom.
Low, very bottom, yeah. Okay.
That's where the plug is.
Okay.
On the big
It's
bathtub
not
back
muddy,
there.
it's so close to the bottom.
Now, when it comes into the penstocks, is that like mid-range? Like where about is that?
It's about a third the way up.
Okay. Okay. And it's essentially some kind of hole with a big grate over it, just
Exactly.
letting it in. Okay.
Big trash rack to block the debris.
Right.
You wouldn't want a tree or something getting
Yeah.
sucked in there. So when Bull Shoals Dam was built, it was the 5th largest dam in the United States. It's still in the top 10 biggest dams in the U.S. and its authorized purposes when it was constructed was flood risk reduction, hydropower, drinking water supply, environmental stewardship, and recreation. Now, those last 3 came on years later as we realized the additional benefits. So originally it was flood control and hydropower, and then later on we realized the benefits of drinking water, the need for environmental stewardship and protection of the resources up and downstream, as well as just what recreation can do to energize the economy. And when Truman dedicated the dam, he talked about the prosperity that it would bring to the region. We've got 20+ parks up there on the lakeside that folks can come to, and when they're here in the area, they're spending money at grocery stores and shopping and stuff like that. So we know that REC's tremendously impacted during those high water years, but the authorizing purposes, the original purposes, were flood control and hydropower. So the recreation takes the last bit of that pie, and so we can't make operating decisions based off of recreation. We have to make it based off of flood control.
Yeah, and in the early 1900s, is that right? That there was some catastrophic flooding through this area?
So in the 1915s and 1927, you had these catastrophic floods come through here that just wiped out all the downstream areas, and that was the cause, the catalyst, I would say, that prompted our lawmakers to enact the Flood Control Acts and get funding behind the idea of putting dams on these rivers so that you don't go from flood to drought, drought to flood, flood to drought, drought to flood. You can capture that water, harness the energy, and slowly release it downstream, reducing the frequency and severity of those floods. It doesn't stop all the floods, but it slows down the frequency, the number of times, and the severity. So even the last 2 summers before this one, they were less than average rainfall years, but we had several rainfall events that would have caused minor flooding, but we didn't even feel it because we were able to capture it and then slowly release it. You know, in these reservoirs, Beaver, Bull Shoals, Greer's, and Norfolk, we've got the water supply aspect as well. It's the drinking water that gets pulled out of the reservoir and sent to the communities like Bull Shoals, Mountain Home, Flippin, and all the others. So it's also very important, but we're not making water control decisions based off of that.
Yeah, we were shocked to learn that in central Arkansas, a lot of the water still comes from Greer's, like that distance. We didn't realize how far it travels for drinking water purposes.
I've heard a lot of statistics. You can probably find the right ones online. Up in northwest Arkansas, Beaver Water District would tell you maybe 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 Arkansans get their drinking water from Beaver, and then the same from central Arkansas water in that area, maybe 1 in 5 to 1 in 6 get their drinking water from Greer's Ferry. That just also gives you an idea of how massive these reservoirs are when you consider we've got about 3 million people in this state.
So it kind of worked out, I guess. The dams were built and then population grew. I guess without that, though, we wouldn't have really water for everyone, right? Like there's no way you could mathematically have water for everyone right now without the reservoirs.
Yeah, these areas just wouldn't have grown like they have without the water resource infrastructure.
Yeah.
You know, northwest Arkansas is a very fast growing area, and it would not have boomed like it did without the water resource infrastructure there to support it.
You would have to stop building because you wouldn't have been able to access water for that building. So,
You'd be having to try to pump water in from somewhere else or truck it in, and you know, the volume you need for growth, you got to have it right there on site, and that's what these reservoirs have provided us. Another water intake structure is proposed for the city of Mountain Home to get even more water out of the reservoir for drinking water.
One of those drinking straws.
That's right.
We call it.
Yeah, you know, I call the trees drinking straws, but the water intake structures as well, big drinking straws that pull that water from the reservoir to the residential areas that need it.
So yeah, without having that as an option, the growth would slow down these cities because they would have no option to find water before they expand.
You'd be stunted, just like these areas were beforehand. It was drought or flood, drought or flood. They didn't have long-term water storage, and so you just had only those that could survive in those really harsh conditions lived here. I think I may have told you the story before. You head up to Branson, you're up there in those hills, and the main draw is that it was where the hillbillies and the bald knobbers and the Jesse Jameses went to hide out because it was a dry or really wet, desolate area that only the toughest of the tough could survive. Install a reservoir like Table Rock or Beaver or Bull Shoals, and now you've got a survivable area. And you're reducing the amount of flooding. And over time, we've gotten better at forecasting the weather and models as to where we think the water's going to go, and so people have moved away from a lot of those areas. And then on the flip side, some people have forgotten how bad it was or just don't know, and so they want to build closer and closer. They want to take out our trees, like I talked to you guys before about, but we don't want them to. We want them to leave all these trees in to keep these shorelines intact, downstream and upstream. That's that environmental stewardship piece. And the hydropower that's produced here, we've discussed before too, is that peaking power. It comes online to meet the energy demand and then goes offline when there isn't such a demand. That also prevents blackouts as well as brownouts. That intermittent power coming in and out to your appliances is really hard on them. Burn up a washer and dryer real quick or a fridge.
It's easy to take a place like this for granted when you're out boating or fishing, but this massive structure is an important piece of infrastructure in Arkansas and really for the whole nation. Bull Shoals Dam provides clean, renewable hydropower that helps keep the lights on for thousands of homes. It also plays a huge role in flood risk management, protecting communities all the way down the White River and beyond. The reservoir behind the dam has become one of Arkansas's favorite playgrounds. Bull Shoals Lake fuels tourism and supports local economies across the Ozarks. Standing here, it's amazing to realize how one project can bring together engineering, conservation, recreation, and economic growth all in one beautiful spot. Thanks for joining us on this tour of Bull Shoals Dam. If you enjoyed seeing this side of the Ozarks, be sure to subscribe and follow along as we keep exploring more incredible places around Arkansas. If you watched until the end, put code word Truman in the comments section. See you next time.